When I was in touch recently with Toronto singer Ian Arden, he mentioned that Mike Bloomfield was an important figure in his life. I asked him to tell me more, and he did.
Hello, my name is Ian Arden. I'm a troubadour from Toronto, Canada. Michael Bloomfield absolutely saved my life. I was 16 years old, just finishing up my grade 11 year at high school, and just as I was getting ready to leave, there were these two bullies that stood in the doorway who saw me leaving, who said, "Don't party too hard this summer, Ian," making reference to the fact that I wasn't exactly known for being invited to or attending parties. But it was okay because I could go home and get lost in the world of folk music and blues and really discover myself and who I was and forge an identity within that music. I was really happy that one of the many albums my father owned was the self-titled Paul Butterfield Blues Band album. In that album, I could invent an entire world. A world where being born in Chicago in 1941 and spending time on the folk scene in the 50s and 60s would yield the found family that I couldn't find in the 21st century in high school. I would hear stories about how last night Paul had lost the best friend he ever had, and that he would wait until tomorrow because he was told that every day would bring about a change. And I felt hopeful that even though I was not in a great place at that time, tomorrow would bring about a change for me. One of the most uplifting songs on that album was Shake Your Moneymaker, where Paul sings, "Now go on, baby, going back to school. Go on, baby, going back to school." And I felt charged, I felt energized because through my guitar playing and singing and songwriting, I felt like I was fortified, I was armed, I could go back to school. And that, to quote the song, that all those bullies were quote unquote nothing but a fool, and that their words had absolutely no bearing. Needless to say, while I identified heavily with Paul Butterfield and his singing and harmonica playing, which informs to this day so much of my own singing and harmonica playing, I was most taken with Michael Bloomfield. What I love about Michael Bloomfield is that he never fully drank the Kool-Aid of temptation that so many of the guitarists of his time were offered. Which is to say that as his star kept rising, he eschewed a lot of the common pitfalls other guitarists went through. He didn't believe the hype. He just kept getting better and better and better. He never drank his own Kool-Aid, so to speak. What makes Michael Bloomfield so astonishing is that to this day, only real musical savants know about Michael Bloomfield. Only the people who are real historians, amateur or professional, of music know who Michael Bloomfield is and know about his discography. And this is somebody who came from a wealthy family. He talks about how he had a big fat bar mitzvah and his dad's a multimillionaire, who didn't really care about money. He didn't want to join the family business. He wanted to play not just music, but he wanted to just play the blues and play guitar. You heard so much about Michael's generous spirit, about how he lost, to quote Michael, he lost his ass trying to feed and house his friends so that he could make them join his band called the Electric Flag. And how, he could have had almost any lead singer front the Electric Flag, but he chose Nick Gravenitis, who was a truly talented individual And maybe Nick Gravenitis didn't look the part of what you'd expect a rock and roll front man to look like, but his voice was undeniable. And so that kind of decision making, I mean, yeah, the Electric Flag was really a musician's band. It wasn't about image and being flashy and wearing, you know, turquoise jewelry, or the guitarist having a lot of rings on their hand, or the cool haircut that the guitarist had, or the Chelsea boots or the Cuban heel. When they performed at the Monterey Pop Festival, it wasn't about gimmicks at all. It was just about incredible reverence for the roots of American music. And while the other acts who played Monterey were all incredible in their own way, they all, to a certain extent, with the exception of maybe Simon and Garfunkel and a few other acts, a lot of them were showmen or showwomen, people who really loved to put on a show. And it was about pyrotechnics and maybe things other than just the music. That's what I love about Michael Bloomfield. Because there was no way that as a kid I could ever be somebody like Hendrix or somebody like Otis Redding, who are just so extroverted and grandiose in their performance. But when I listened to Michael Bloomfield's fiery electric guitar playing, whether it was on Paul Butterfield's music or Bob Dylan's music, or later on that incredible seminal album East West by the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, I could really feel not just a sense of admiration, but a sense of identity. Because yeah, I was a nerdy kid with curly hair, and so was Michael. But through that fiery, one-of-a-kind guitar playing, I was able to gain the respect of my peers. By the time the Christmas assembly came about later that year, after that terrible summer I spent in isolation, I became one of the most talked about guitarists in the school. Did you hear what Ian did at the Christmas assembly? He just started, he went on stage with his friends and just started playing the most incredible blues guitar you ever heard. And all I did was just follow Mike Bloomfield's lead. That's all I did. As did so many of that generation. And it's important for all of us to keep the legacy of Mike Bloomfield alive. He was such a kind, giving person. He was such a consummate musician too. It wasn't just about the 12-bar blues and the blues scale. He was just constantly getting better. He wanted to know about jazz. He was an expert on acoustic guitar as well, and country music, and just about anything. Apparently, I heard that Michael Bloomfield would sit at home and he could play guitar along the TV, and he just could play every single song that was part of a commercial break on TV, whether it was jazz music or complicated harmonies or complicated rhythms or catchy melodies. He just knew it all. He was a real consummate professional. And he was a voracious reader as well, so literate, so intelligent, and such a hunger for knowledge. But ultimately, as we saw with Jimi Hendrix and other guitarists, he was so kind and so generous to others that maybe he didn't focus as much on himself. And so ultimately, we lost Mike Bloomfield well before his time. And what I hope people can grasp from Mike Bloomfield's story is that you are enough. That desire to keep getting better and keep improving, and that you aren't good enough, it drives a lot of musicians, but it can feed the negative voices in your head as well, the voices that you aren't enough. And for some, in fact, for many, the only way for some musicians, if not too many musicians, they silence that voice the only way they know how, with substance abuse. And so Mike Bloomfield serves not only as an inspiration to me, but a cautionary tale that we are all enough, and that the world is a much sadder, emptier place without Mike Bloomfield in it. All I can do is listen to his music as often as I can, remind myself that as much as I need to go home and practice and improve and keep getting better at music, I am enough, and I need to focus on taking care of myself and my mental health. but Mike Bloomfield's music will never die. I encourage everybody to listen to that first Paul Butterfield album and be absolutely amazed by young Michael's frenetic, energetic guitar playing, and follow him through to the Super Session album, where him and Stephen Stills absolutely devastate the listener with their virtuosity, all the way to the live adventures with his friend Nick Ravenitis, and into his final recordings, where he showed an absolute mastery of his instrument. There's something that's not often appreciated by music listeners, which is Michael's singing and his songwriting sometimes. He wrote and sung a song called Oh Mama. The version that I know is the live version, and he sings, "Just like a shadow, I am fading away." And he goes on to sing about this woman he's in a relationship with, and how she doesn't treat him with the respect he feels he deserves, and how he doesn't feel like he's getting the love he needs. And maybe that was him trying to tell us something, his cry for help. And that's what I like to think about it. And at the end, he sings the line, "And mama, mama, mama won't have no papa at all." And he then ends it with his beautiful Mixolydian guitar playing. And it's just a beautiful cadenza with the band behind him, and it's so heartfelt because ultimately we ended up losing him. We didn't have our papa, our leader. He was the leader in the American guitar community, certainly in the blues guitar community. Anybody will tell you, B.B. King will tell you, if you go back and look at old B.B. King interviews, he will tell you that Michael Bloomfield was the consummate young guitar player who idiomized the music for the baby boomer generation, at least. And Eric Clapton, of course, speaks with reverence, as did Jimi Hendrix. And it was a different time. We didn't take care of him like we should have. And so all we can do is pass his music along, his recordings along. I know I will. Please, I urge and implore each and every one of you, please listen to Mike Bloomfield and share him with your loved ones. He's one of the most open-hearted humans whose work I've ever encountered. And it's up to us to make sure that his work is not lost to history, and that we want to not prove him right when he said that just like a shadow, he was fading away. Because he has so much luminosity, so much light in him. And the luminosity, the light that is his music, shines brighter than the darkest of shadows.
Woke up this morning, I looked round for my shoes. You know I had those mean old walking blues, yeah. Woke up this morning, I looked round for my shoes. Well, I had those mean old walking blues. Some people tell me that worried blues ain't bad. It's the worst old feeling I ever had, yeah. People tell me that worried blues ain't bad. It's the worst old feeling, ooh, child, I ever had. Books run to the ocean and the ocean runs to the sea. If I don't find my baby, gonna bury me, yeah. Went to the ocean and the ocean went to the sea. Yeah, if I don't find my baby, oh yeah, they'll bury me. days since my baby started low down ways. Yeah. And it seemed like I